They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from the one you trust most. I never realized how sharp it could be until the morning my husband left me for another woman right in front of me, and thought I wouldn't notice. If you love stories of revenge where the ending is never what they expect, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single twist. Now, let me take you to the moment it all began. For years, I had planned the perfect escape. It wasn't just a vacation, it was supposed to be the renewal of everything Marcus and I had built together. A dream trip to Greece, complete with a villa on Santorini's cliffs, long walks through cobblestone alleys, and glasses of wine under skies painted gold by the setting sun. I had poured my heart into the details, reservations at hidden tavernas locals swore by, tickets to a moonlit concert in an old amphitheater, and even a private boat tour of the caldera. To me, this trip was proof that love could be revived if given the right space to breathe. Marcus never matched my excitement. He nodded when I spoke, smiled faintly when I showed him itineraries, but his eyes never lit up. I told myself he was tired, stressed by work, worn down by the endless grind of his corporate firm. He was always glued to his phone, always chasing deadlines. Once we're there, I'll finally relax, he said absent-mindedly one night, kissing my forehead without looking away from his laptop. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The morning of our flight, I was buzzing with anticipation. At O'Hare Airport, I clutched my passport so tightly my knuckles whitened. The air smelled of coffee and disinfectant, filled with the endless hum of travelers. I looked at Marcus, expecting to see that same glow of excitement on his face. Instead, he looked restless. His leg bounced as he scrolled through his phone, his eyes darting to the clock every few minutes. Excited? I teased, nudging him playfully. Of course, he said, but his smile was thin, barely there. His gaze drifted past me as if he had somewhere else to be. The unease twisted in my gut, but I brushed it off. Love made you soften shadows into excuses. I had become an expert at that. When we reached security, Marcus leaned down, kissed my cheek, and said, "I'll meet you at the gate. Just need to take a quick call." I nodded. Calls had always followed him everywhere. One last email, one last deal, one last excuse, then he would be mine for 2 uninterrupted weeks. That was the promise I clung to. I passed through the scanner, put my shoes back on, and turned to look for him. He was gone, already swallowed by the crowd, phone pressed to his ear. I waited at the gate, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, my stomach fluttering with nervous energy. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. Still no Marcus. I texted him, "Boarding soon. Where are you?" No response. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. The boarding announcement echoed overhead, calling passengers for our flight. My heart began to race. Where was he? Why hadn't he come? I was seconds away from calling again when my phone buzzed in my hand. A message from Sophie, my best friend. "Hey, I don't know how to say this, but Marcus isn't on your flight." I stared at the screen, confused. Not on my flight. What did she mean? My fingers fumbled as I typed back, "What are you talking about?" 3 dots appeared, vanished, then returned. My pulse pounded in my ears as I waited. Then the message came. "I just saw him. He's boarding a different plane. And he's not alone." The world tilted. I felt the blood drain from my face. My lungs refused to draw air. My hands shook as I typed back, "Who is he with?" The reply was immediate. "A woman. Brunette. Younger than you. They're laughing together. He has his arm around her." I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as though iron bands were pressing against my ribs. This couldn't be happening. Not Marcus. Not after everything we had planned. My eyes scanned the sea of faces around me, desperate to catch sight of him, to prove Sophie wrong. But I already knew she wasn't. She would never send me that message unless she was certain. The final boarding call rang out. People lined up, handing over tickets, stepping onto the plane that was supposed to carry both of us toward the life I had dreamed of. But Marcus wasn't here. He never intended to be. He had played me, lied to me, and left me standing alone at the gate. A storm raged inside me, shock, fury, heartbreak all tangled together. My fingers clenched around the ticket until it crumpled. I had a choice. I could board the plane alone, hide my pain in the beauty of Greece, and cry into my wine every night. Or I could turn around, face the reality of what Marcus had done, and make him regret ever thinking he could humiliate me. I inhaled slowly, forcing the panic back down. My hands shook, but not from fear anymore. From resolve. I wasn't going to break down in public. I wasn't going to scream or sob. No. If Marcus thought he could outsmart me, he had made a grave mistake. He wasn't the only one who knew how to plan every detail. And he certainly wasn't the only one who could play a long game. The gate agent called out one last time, "Ma'am, final boarding." Her voice barely registered. I straightened, smoothed my blouse, and slid my boarding pass back into my purse. I gave her a calm smile, one that hid the fire raging beneath the surface. "I won't be flying today," I said softly. Then I turned and walked away. The chatter of the airport dimmed into a hollow buzz. My heels clicked against the polished floor, steady and purposeful. Marcus thought he had escaped to paradise, but he had no idea what awaited him. Betrayal wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning. And by the time I was done, Marcus would wish he had never boarded that plane. When I walked away from that gate, I wasn't just leaving behind a flight. I was leaving behind the version of myself who bent, compromised, and forgave. The old Isabella died the moment Marcus boarded another plane with that woman. What remained was someone sharper, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Betrayal had burned away the softness, and what was left was resolve. I didn't rush. I sat in a cafe tucked inside the terminal, ordered a black coffee, and let the bitterness settle on my tongue. Around me, travelers hurried past, faces lit with anticipation, voices weaving together in a chorus of beginnings. I had no beginning left, not in the way I had imagined. But I had something else, clarity. And clarity was power. Sophie's name glowed on my phone. She had called twice already, but I hadn't answered. Now, I picked up. "Isabella," she breathed, her voice strained. "Tell me you're okay." I let the silence stretch. My reflection stared back at me in the glossy tabletop, and I barely recognized her, eyes too steady, mouth set like stone. "I'm not okay," I said finally, my tone calm, almost detached. "But I will be. I just need your help." Sophie hesitated, but she knew me well enough not to argue. "What do you need?" "Find out everything about her. Name, job, connections, social media. If Marcus is walking through airports with her, she's not a fling. I want to know exactly who I'm dealing with." Sophie exhaled. "Consider it done. Give me 30 minutes. I hung up. My mind was already turning over possibilities, piecing together the next moves like a chessboard forming in front of me. Marcus thought he had blindsided me, but he'd forgotten I had been the one who planned this trip down to the last detail. I knew the airline systems, the resort policies, the fine print that most people ignored. He might have the mistress, but I had the map. And the map was about to become his trap. The minutes dragged. I sipped my coffee, eyes scanning the departures board. Marcus's flight blinked at me in bold yellow letters. Gate 23. Destination, Santorini. I imagined him and the brunette, laughing, whispering, weaving dreams they thought they could live at my expense. My jaw tightened. He thought he'd outmaneuvered me, but he didn't realize how patient I could be. Patience was my weapon, and Marcus had just handed me the perfect battlefield. My phone buzzed. A message from Sophie. Her name's Chloe Reynolds. PR executive. Big on networking events, picture-perfect social media presence, always surrounded by people with money and power. No serious relationships on record before Marcus. Sending screenshots now. Images filled my screen. Chloe smiling at charity galas, posing at rooftop bars, her arm hooked through men who looked like they stepped out of glossy magazines. She was polished, calculated. Not a naive girl swept off her feet, but a woman who knew exactly what she wanted. That made her dangerous. But it also made her predictable. I typed back, and Marcus's bookings. Sophie's reply was swift. They're checked in under his business account. Santorini's Amara Cliffs Resort. Upgraded suite. You were right, he used his company's points. Guess your anniversary gift is now his romantic getaway. I leaned back in my chair, my lips curving into something between a smile and a sneer. Marcus had been arrogant enough to use work resources to fund his affair. That would be his first mistake. The second was thinking I wouldn't respond. I logged into our shared airline account, fingers flying across the screen. Chloe's ticket popped up alongside Marcus's. A few small tweaks, a changed digit here, a mismatched name there, and suddenly, Chloe's seat was attached to a passport number that didn't pass international clearance. I confirmed the changes, heart steady, pulse slow. By the time she reached her destination, Chloe would be facing questions she couldn't answer. Next, I dialed the resort. My voice was sugar-sweet as I introduced myself as Mrs. Marcus Hayes. I just wanted to confirm your guest policies, I said, feigning innocence. If my husband arrives without me, is he able to check in alone? The manager's voice was polite, professional. Our policy requires both named guests to be present at check-in for suite confirmations. It's to protect against misuse. If there's been any mix-up, the reservation holder can adjust upon arrival, but otherwise, both parties must be present. Perfect. I thanked him warmly, hung up, and stared at the blank wall opposite me. Marcus was walking into a snare of his own making, and all I had to do was watch him tangle deeper with every step. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Marcus thrived on image. His reputation at his firm was spotless. Every handshake, every deal, every presentation was polished to perfection. But reputations were fragile. All it took was one well-timed whisper, one strategically leaked email, to unravel it. I drafted a note to myself, forward itinerary to his office. That would be the finale, but for now, I needed to let the smaller cracks spread before I delivered the earthquake. Another message from Sophie lit up my phone. Isabella, are you sure about this? I mean, revenge is one thing, but... Don't, I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. Don't try to pull me back. He left me standing at a gate with a ticket to nowhere while he ran off to paradise with her. He doesn't get to walk away clean. Silence on the line. Then, softly, okay. Just, be careful. Promise me that. I will, I said, though we both knew my definition of careful was changing by the minute. I left the cafe and wandered through the terminal, my steps calm, deliberate. The plan was forming, piece by piece, and each piece slid into place with terrifying precision. Marcus had always underestimated me. He thought my talent for details was cute, something that made me a good party planner, a supportive wife. He never realized details were weapons. And I was about to sharpen them all against him. As I reached the exit, I paused, watching the planes through the glass windows. Somewhere up there, Marcus was sipping champagne beside Chloe, thinking he had won. He had no idea that when he landed, his paradise would already be crumbling. I whispered to the glass, the words meant only for me. Enjoy your flight, Marcus. When you touch down, the rules will have changed. I walked out of the airport into the cold Chicago air, pulling my coat tighter around me. My phone buzzed again, Marcus's name lighting up the screen. For a moment, I stared at it, my chest tightening. Old habits died hard. But then I silenced the call and slipped the phone into my bag. The game had begun. And I wasn't playing to lose. The Mediterranean sun had barely begun to set when Marcus's flight touched down in Santorini. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. I had orchestrated enough to know how the scene would unfold. He would step off the plane, his sunglasses perched arrogantly on his face, Chloe on his arm, both of them smiling like thieves who thought they'd gotten away clean. He'd expect the resort driver to hold up his name on a placard, a luxury car waiting to whisk them away to their cliffside suite. He'd expect ease, indulgence, a flawless escape. Instead, the cracks were already waiting. Back in Chicago, I had checked into a modest hotel near the airport, waiting for the messages I knew were coming. My phone vibrated before I had even unpacked my bag. A travel alert. Passenger Chloe Reynolds, restricted for international travel irregularities. Denied boarding on return connection. I exhaled slowly, the corner of my mouth curving. The first domino had tipped. I could imagine the scene clearly, Chloe at the transfer desk, confusion etched into her perfect features as officials pulled her aside. Her voice rising, frustration bleeding through her polished composure. There must be a mistake. I'm supposed to be in Santorini, she'd protest, only to be met with patient but immovable faces. Restricted passports were not casual errors. They required clearance, review, and time. Time Chloe didn't have. Meanwhile, Marcus, blissfully unaware, was already in Greece. I pictured him scanning the arrivals hall, expecting Chloe at his side, only to realize she wasn't there. He'd call. She wouldn't answer. He'd text. She'd respond with panic, fury, confusion. And he would do what Marcus always did, he'd try to fix it, to control it. But control was no longer his to wield. I leaned back on the bed, phone in hand, waiting. It didn't take long. Marcus's name lit up my screen. I let it ring until it went silent. Moments later, a new message arrived. Where are you? The car's here. Call me. I didn't respond. Another text followed. Isabella. Are you still in Chicago? I let that one hang too. If he wanted answers, he would have to sit with his own lies first. An hour later, Sophie called. Isabella, you won't believe this. Chloe's stranded. She's stuck in Athens, arguing with airline officials. They won't clear her passport. She's furious. Good, I said flatly. Marcus keeps trying to call her. He's freaking out. He doesn't understand why she hasn't landed. Let him stew, I replied, my tone icy. He's about to learn what helplessness feels like. By now, Marcus would have arrived at the Amara Cliffs Resort. He'd walk through its marble lobby, Chloe still absent, and stride confidently to the check-in desk. Reservation for Marcus Hayes, he'd declare, expecting deference. Instead, the receptionist's polite smile would falter. I'm sorry, sir, but the reservation lists 2 guests. Both must be present for suite confirmation. He'd argue. I knew that much. He'd press his credit card forward, insist that he was the account holder, that the suite was his. But policies at a 5-star resort weren't written to bend. They were written to stand. He'd push harder, his voice dropping into that commanding tone he always used when he felt power slipping. But this time, it wouldn't work. Not without Chloe. Not without me. I smiled to myself, imagining his frustration rising, his hand raking through his hair, his phone buzzing in his pocket with Chloe's desperate texts. And then, when the receptionist refused again, he'd be forced to leave. For the first time in a long time, Marcus would feel the ground shifting beneath him. That night, in my small hotel room, I opened my laptop and drafted the next phase. A carefully worded email, one that looked like an ordinary confirmation, but forwarded to very particular recipients, his assistant, his firm's travel manager, his direct supervisor. Confirmation, romantic getaway, Amara Cliffs Resort, Santorini. 2 guests. Attached were the screenshots of his booking, his upgraded suite, the name Chloe Reynolds tucked neatly beside his own. It wasn't fabricated. It was simply the truth, delivered to the right audience at the worst possible time. Before sending, I hovered over the mouse, savoring the moment. Marcus had built his career on perception. Now that perception would betray him as thoroughly as he had betrayed me. With a single click, the email flew into cyberspace, a silent grenade waiting to detonate in his professional life. Almost instantly, my burner phone buzzed. A message from Marcus: "They won't let me check in. Something's wrong. Did you call the hotel? Did you change something?" His words came sharp, panicked. I let them sit, unanswered, the silence itself another form of power. Then came the next: "Isabella. I know you're angry, but please. Just help me fix this. We'll talk after." The audacity nearly made me laugh. After he had abandoned me at an airport to play house with Chloe. No, there would be no after. Only consequences. By midnight, I had the picture I wanted: Chloe stranded in Athens, her patience unraveling as her passport issue dragged on, Marcus pacing outside a luxury resort he couldn't enter, his phone a lifeline that led only to silence. And somewhere back in Chicago, his company beginning to murmur, to wonder, to question. Sophie messaged again. "They're both unraveling, Bella. Chloe's calling Marcus non-stop, blaming him for everything. Marcus is desperate, keeps checking his email, trying to salvage the trip. He looks lost." "Good," I typed back. "He hasn't even seen the worst of it yet." I closed the laptop and lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. My heart wasn't racing anymore. My breathing was steady. Revenge wasn't about screaming or crying. It was about timing. And timing was on my side. I whispered into the quiet, a vow only I would hear. "You thought you left me behind, Marcus. But I'm still here. And I've only just begun." By morning, Santorini's sun would have painted the cliffs gold, but Marcus wasn't enjoying it from a balcony suite. He was slumped in a rental car, circling the narrow streets like a man locked out of his own life. I knew because Sophie's updates came in waves, each one sharper than the last. "He's been calling Chloe non-stop," she wrote. She finally answered. "They're screaming at each other." I could picture it vividly. Marcus pacing the cobblestone sidewalk outside the Amara Cliffs Resort, phone pressed to his ear, Chloe's voice shrill on the other end. "You promised me paradise, Marcus. I'm stuck in Athens like a criminal. They flagged my passport because of you." He'd argue, deny, swear he'd fix it. But Marcus was always better at creating chaos than solving it. His attempts to calm her would sound hollow, his reassurances brittle. Chloe wasn't the type to endure humiliation quietly. Her anger would cut deep, and every word would remind him of the life unraveling before his eyes. I sat at my desk in the modest hotel, sipping bitter coffee, my laptop glowing with possibility. It wasn't enough to watch him flail. He needed to feel stripped of every illusion he clung to. So I opened a new tab, one connected to a favor I'd carefully banked years ago. A friend from college now worked in travel security, the kind of person who could arrange detours for difficult passengers. I dialed his number. "I need a guest rerouted," I said plainly. "Not detained. Just redirected. Somewhere that looks legitimate enough to fool him." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "You always did like details, Isabella. Who's the unlucky traveler?" "Marcus Hayes. He'll be trying to book something last minute in Santorini. Make sure the confirmation email looks authentic. 5 stars, discreet, luxury sounding. But it needs to lead somewhere else." "Somewhere else like where?" "A wellness retreat," I said, my lips curving. "One that specializes in long-term rehabilitation. Somewhere that doesn't let people just leave." He whistled low. "You're ruthless." "I'm precise," I corrected. Within hours, I had the confirmation email ready, styled in the same format as Marcus's past bookings, right down to the fonts and phrasing. "Private stay confirmed, Ionian Retreat, Santorini. Reserved for Mr. Marcus Hayes." Attached were fake details of his application, complete with intake forms that made it look as though Marcus had voluntarily sought help for stress and impulse control. The trap was laid, seamless and waiting. By afternoon, my burner phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "I found a new hotel. Sending them my details now." Seconds later, "Finally, some luck." I smiled slowly. He thought he had saved himself. He had no idea he was stepping into a cage disguised as sanctuary. Meanwhile, Chloe's fury escalated. Sophie sent me screenshots. Her social media posts were full of cryptic rants. "Some people show their true colors when you need them most. Imagine being stranded because your partner can't even get basics right." She was unraveling publicly, and I knew Marcus would see it all. He prided himself on control, on curated appearances. Watching his mistress torch their image in real time would cut deeper than any blade. That evening, I imagined him arriving at the Ionian Retreat. The facility was tucked away in the hills, its gates tall, its gardens immaculate. From the outside, it looked like serenity. The staff were trained to smile warmly, to welcome guests into what they believed was a journey. Marcus, exhausted and desperate, would hand over his passport, expecting comfort. Instead, the intake would begin. Forms, signatures, policies explained in soft, measured tones. "Phones and wallets for safekeeping, sir. Just until your program is complete." The moment they took his belongings, the illusion of freedom would vanish, but by then, he'd already stepped too far inside. I didn't have to be there to know how Marcus would react. He'd argue, raise his voice, demand a manager. But the staff at such facilities were experts in deflection. Every protest would be reframed as denial, every shout as stress, every attempt to leave as resistance to treatment. "Adjustment takes time," they'd reassure him, their smiles patient but immovable. The very walls of the retreat were designed to absorb rebellion and echo back compliance. As night fell in Chicago, I poured myself a glass of wine, savoring the anticipation. My phone buzzed with another string of Marcus's messages, desperate and jumbled. "Something's wrong. This isn't a hotel. They won't let me leave." "Then, Isabella, you did this, didn't you?" Finally, a last plea, "Please. Help me. Don't leave me here." For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, letting the words sink in. He had left me at an airport gate, discarded like luggage he no longer wanted. Now, the tables had turned. He was the one trapped, begging, powerless. I typed a single reply, "Enjoy your vacation, Marcus. You'll never forget it." I hit send and turned off the phone. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was liberation. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of his lies lift from my shoulders. He wasn't in control anymore. I was. But this was only the beginning. The retreat was just a stage. The real devastation was yet to come, the moment his professional world discovered the truth, the moment his carefully polished reputation crumbled like ash in his hands. Marcus thought losing Chloe in a hotel suite was the worst that could happen. He hadn't realized that I still had the power to burn down everything he'd ever built. And I intended to. By the time dawn broke over Santorini, Marcus was already pacing inside his new accommodations. The Ionian retreat looked like luxury at first glance, whitewashed walls, fragrant gardens, ocean views, but inside, it was sterile. Doors locked automatically, meals arrived on strict schedules, and every conversation with staff carried the same subtle undertone: "You are not here for leisure, you are here for treatment." I knew exactly how his morning played out. He would wake to the sound of a gentle knock, a tray of herbal tea, and a voice saying, "Time for orientation, Mr. Hayes." He would argue, he hadn't signed up for orientation, he just wanted a room. But the staff would hand him a clipboard, intake forms already filled with his details, signed with his name. "It's all confirmed," they'd insist. "You requested this day." He would protest, his voice rising, demanding to leave. The staff would remain calm, their tone soothing, writing his defiance down as denial and resistance to treatment. Every time Marcus pushed back, he only dug the hole deeper. Meanwhile, Chloe was exploding. Sophie forwarded me screenshots of Chloe's texts, long, frantic messages flooding Marcus's phone before it was confiscated. "I'm still stuck. This is humiliating. Do you realize what people are saying? Everyone thinks I'm some kind of criminal." Then, the venom turned on him. "You're useless, Marcus. You promised me the world, and you can't even get me past customs. Do not call me again." Her anger was public too. She vented across social media, thinly veiled posts aimed directly at him. "Some men are just children in expensive suits." Lesson learned: never trust someone who says, "Trust me," too often. For a woman in PR, her meltdown was poison. And Marcus couldn't stop it. He had no phone, no voice, no way to repair the image slipping through his fingers. Chloe had been his shiny prize, the validation he craved. Now, she was turning into his liability. I sat in my Chicago hotel, sipping coffee as Sophie's updates rolled in. "His office is buzzing," she said over the phone. "People are whispering. His assistant just got an email about his Santorini trip." "The one you forwarded." "Good," I murmured. And it's spreading. Someone printed it out. It's on his boss's desk. They know he booked a luxury suite with Chloe. The company paid for it. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. Marcus's world was built on a single pillar: reputation. At work, he was the man who never slipped, never embarrassed the firm. He sold perfection. But perfection was fragile. And I had just driven a wedge straight through it. I imagined the office atmosphere, his colleagues clustered in hushed circles, glancing at each other with knowing eyes. His boss, a man obsessed with discipline and appearances, reading the confirmation email twice before calling finance. "Cross-check this with his travel expenses," he'd bark. And when the truth surfaced, that Marcus had funneled corporate points into a romantic getaway, it wouldn't just be an indiscretion. It would be a scandal. Back in Santorini, Marcus must have realized the trap. Maybe it was when they confiscated his phone, or when a man in a white coat sat across from him, pen poised over a notebook. "Tell me, Mr. Hayes," the man would begin softly, "when did you first recognize that dishonesty was impacting your relationships?" Marcus would scoff, deny, insist there was no problem. The man would only smile faintly, jotting notes. Denial is common at this stage. Marcus had always been skilled at twisting narratives. But here, every word he spoke would be reframed against him. If he grew angry, it was evidence of underlying issues. If he shut down, it was avoidance. The very walls conspired to turn his protests into symptoms. He wasn't a guest anymore. He was a patient. And the staff wouldn't let him forget it. That evening, Sophie called again. "Bella, you won't believe this. His boss held an emergency meeting. They're investigating him for misuse of funds. And Chloe. She's not defending him. She's distancing herself." I laughed, the sound sharp and foreign to my own ears. Of course she is. Loyalty was never part of the deal. Marcus had traded me for Chloe because she was new, exciting, an escape. But when the escape burned, she was quick to toss him into the fire to save herself. I almost admired it. Almost. My phone buzzed again, an email this time. Subject, status update, Ionian retreat. The message was brief but perfect. Mr. Marcus Hayes has entered his rehabilitation program. Initial resistance observed. Adjustment period anticipated. I read it twice, a slow smile spreading across my face. He wasn't checked into a villa. He was checked into a prison with soft sheets and soothing voices. And no matter what he said, no one would believe him. But I wasn't finished. The retreat stripped him of freedom. Chloe stripped him of validation. The office scandal stripped him of reputation. The only thing left to take was his illusion of control. Marcus had always believed he could charm or argue his way out of anything. Now, he was discovering that sometimes, no one is listening. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching planes rise and disappear into the sky. Somewhere across the ocean, Marcus sat in a room he couldn't leave, his colleagues tearing apart his credibility, his mistress dismantling him online. And me? I was free, calm, untouchable. I whispered into the glass, the words tasting sweeter than the wine. "You thought you had the last word, Marcus. But I write the ending now. And you haven't seen anything yet." While Marcus tried to shout his way out of the Ionian retreat, the real damage was taking shape back home. His company wasn't built to tolerate scandal. It thrived on order, loyalty, and the image of clean perfection. The board members were old men in crisp suits who still believed personal life reflected professional discipline. And now, printed across their desks, was evidence that Marcus had used corporate funds for a secret vacation with a woman who wasn't his wife. I didn't need to be there to know how the meeting unfolded. His supervisor, Everett, would sit at the head of the table, glasses perched on his nose, flipping through the forwarded itinerary with a deepening frown. "So," he'd say, voice like gravel, "our golden boy has been expensing romance." The others would murmur, a few raising eyebrows, some feigning shock, though I knew they'd relish the gossip. "This is unacceptable," Everett would conclude. "Finance will begin a full audit. Until then, Hayes is suspended from active projects." Just like that, the man who had strutted through the office like he owned the place was reduced to a liability. The irony was delicious. Marcus had always weaponized appearances. He knew which tie to wear to each client meeting, which wine to order, which words to sprinkle in to make himself seem indispensable. He crafted his image like a sculpture, polished until it gleamed. But now, no matter how polished he once looked, the cracks were spreading, and everyone was leaning in to see them. Meanwhile, at the retreat, Marcus's carefully curated mask was slipping faster than he could repair it. The first night, he must have realized just how little freedom he had. His phone and wallet were locked away, for safekeeping. The doors to his room clicked shut from the outside. Even meals were served on trays slid neatly across the threshold. When he demanded to leave, the staff responded with that same infuriating calm. "Adjustment is the hardest stage, Mr. Hayes. Many guests feel this way at first. To them, his panic wasn't a reason to release him. It was a symptom to monitor. I imagined him sitting in one of their therapy circles the next morning, forced into a semicircle of strangers in linen shirts. A facilitator would smile warmly and ask, "Marcus, would you like to share why you're here?" His jaw would tighten, eyes blazing as he snapped, "I'm not supposed to be here. This is a mistake." The facilitator would nod thoughtfully, jotting something down. "Denial," he'd whispered just loud enough for Marcus to hear. Every word, every protest, became evidence against him. He was trapped in a loop where the harder he fought, the deeper he sank. Sophie updated me with relish. "Chloe's cutting him off publicly now," she said over the phone. "She's telling mutual acquaintances she was misled by him. Her posts are getting pettier." She wrote, "Lesson learned, never be the side piece to a man who can't even manage his marriage. It's brutal." I laughed softly. Chloe wasn't loyal, she was strategic. She could smell the rot and was already jumping ship. At work, whispers grew louder. A former colleague of mine who still worked in Marcus's firm messaged me anonymously, "You didn't hear it from me, but your husband's name is mud right now. His boss is furious. Clients are asking questions. No one's defending him." I read the words twice, my chest swelling with something that wasn't quite joy but something sharper, stronger. Vindication. Back in Santorini, Marcus's despair must have been rising to fever pitch. Maybe he tried to bribe the staff, sliding his credit card across the desk only for them to remind him politely that his stay had already been paid in advance. Maybe he begged another guest to lend him a phone, only to have the attempt intercepted. Every angle was blocked. The retreat was designed for control, and Marcus had none left. I pictured him sitting alone on the edge of his narrow bed, head in his hands, replaying the moment he left me at the airport. Did he feel regret? Shame? Or just rage that his plan wasn't unfolding smoothly? Knowing Marcus, it was rage. He never apologized when he was wrong, he lashed out, convinced the world had betrayed him. Now he was discovering what betrayal really felt like. That night, I received a final email confirmation from the retreat. Guest Marcus Hayes has entered phase 1 of treatment. Limited communication permitted. Monitoring continues. I closed my laptop and poured another glass of wine, the city lights of Chicago glowing faintly through the window. He was thousands of miles away, trapped in a world of locked doors and endless therapy sessions, while his career collapsed one email at a time. I didn't need to touch him, see him, or even speak to him. The system itself was devouring him for me. For years, Marcus had convinced me I was powerless. That I needed him to navigate the world, that his success was ours, that without him I was just background noise. But watching his empire crumble piece by piece, I realized the truth. I had always been the architect. He had only been the mask. And masks, when ripped away, are nothing more than paper. As I turned off the light and slid beneath the covers, I whispered into the dark, a vow carried on my breath. You wanted paradise, Marcus. Instead, you found prison. And tomorrow, I'll take away the last thing you think you still own, your voice in the world outside these walls. Marcus had always been a man who thrived on control. He controlled the narrative, the tone of every conversation, the outcome of every room he walked into. But in the Ionian retreat, that control bled away like water through cracked glass. The staff were experts in dismantling masks. Their questions were deceptively soft. Marcus, when did you first notice your tendency to manipulate others? Marcus, how long have you struggled with dishonesty in relationships? Each time he denied it, their pens scratched across their notebooks, as if denial itself was the most damning evidence of all. I pictured him there, jaw tight, fists clenched in his lap, fury simmering in every muscle. He would say the words he always did, "This is a mistake. I don't belong here." I'm not like these people. But the facilitator's smile never faltered. That's exactly what many of our guests say in the early stages, they'd reply. His outrage was a script they already knew by heart. Meals were scheduled. Lights out at 9. Therapy circles in the morning, one-on-one evaluations in the afternoon. Marcus, the man who once strutted into boardrooms and ordered waiters around in restaurants, was reduced to a patient asking permission for bathroom breaks. The humiliation would eat at him more than the confinement. He wasn't just trapped, he was invisible. His name meant nothing here. Meanwhile, the outside world was closing in. Sophie called me with a tremor in her voice. Bella, it's worse than you imagined. The firm isn't just auditing Marcus, they've already cut him off from client communications. His accounts are frozen. He's suspended indefinitely. I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in like music. And his boss. Everett told the board Marcus's actions were a breach of ethical standards. They're considering termination. The corner of my mouth curled. Termination. The word Marcus had always dangled over others, the word he thought would never be attached to him. Now it was stalking him, circling closer with every passing hour. But I wasn't done. I had one last string to pull, one last blow that would leave him with no way to crawl back. I drafted a second email, more damning than the first. This one wasn't just about the resort or the mistress. This was about misuse of corporate funds, detailed, undeniable, and humiliating. I attached screenshots of the itinerary, receipts tied directly to his business account, and the resort's confirmation of 2 guests. My subject line was simple: immediate review required, expense fraud. When I hit send, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, not in fear, but in liberation. The email wasn't a grenade this time. It was an earthquake. And Marcus's carefully built tower was about to crumble for good. Back in Santorini, he must have sensed it. The retreat didn't allow him access to phones, but I imagined him pacing, desperate for news, begging staff to let him make a single call. I have to contact my office, he'd plead, his voice cracking between anger and panic. But the staff would shake their heads gently. All external communication is restricted during Phase 1, Mr. Hayes. Please, trust the process. Trust the process. Marcus, who had never trusted anyone, who had manipulated every system to serve his needs, was now being told to surrender. And for the first time in his life, surrender wasn't optional. Chloe, meanwhile, had turned venomous. Sophie sent me screenshots of her messages to mutual acquaintances. Marcus tricked me. He used me. He's not who he pretends to be. Her words were brutal, public, and most importantly, credible. Chloe was no longer the glamorous secret. She was the witness tearing his mask off in front of everyone. His mistress had become his prosecutor. At the firm, the whispers had become statements. One anonymous employee posted online about Marcus's scandal, and the post spread quickly across professional forums. Senior executive misuses company funds for personal affair, ethics violation under review. The details weren't official, but they were close enough to be believable. And in corporate culture, perception mattered more than proof. Marcus's name was mud before the ink even dried on his suspension. I sat by my hotel window that night, watching headlights crawl across the streets below, and thought about how far I had come. A week ago, I was the woman planning romantic dinners and boat rides. Now, I was the architect of his undoing. The transformation felt almost unreal, but the calm in my chest told me it was real enough. I wasn't trembling anymore. I wasn't the abandoned wife at the gate. I was the woman who rewrote the rules. The next morning, I received another email from the retreat. Mr. Hayes continues to resist adjustment. Displays signs of anger and distrust. Staff recommendation, extended stay. Extended stay. I laughed out loud, the sound sharp and triumphant. He wouldn't be leaving anytime soon. Not with his reputation collapsing, not with Chloe gone, not with his career in flames. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, savoring the heat against my palms, and whispered to myself, the mask is gone, Marcus. And when you finally step out of that place, there'll be nothing left to return to. When the official letter came through, it was almost anticlimactic. A single PDF attachment forwarded by Sophie, her message short, "It's done." I opened it on my laptop, my pulse steady, my breath even. The letterhead bore the firm's logo, the language cold and precise, effective immediately. Marcus Hayes is terminated from his position for breach of ethical conduct and misuse of company resources. All access revoked. It was the kind of sterile document Marcus had once signed for other people, the kind he thought would never have his name at the top. Now, his kingdom had collapsed with a single memo. I closed the laptop and let the silence fill the room. It wasn't victory I felt. It was clarity. Marcus was no longer an executive, no longer the golden boy in expensive suits. He was just a man, trapped, powerless, stripped of everything he valued. And I had done it with nothing more than patience and precision. Inside the Ionian retreat, he must have felt the shift even without knowing why. Men like Marcus sensed when their power was bleeding out. I pictured him sitting in a sterile room across from a therapist, his jaw tight, his voice raw from repeating the same protests. "This is wrong. I'm not supposed to be here. My company needs me." The therapist's reply would be gentle, almost kind. "That's a common illusion, Marcus. Many guests believe the outside world can't function without them. In truth, it always can." Those words would slice him deeper than any scandal. Marcus had built his life on the belief that he was indispensable. Now, even the staff of a retreat treated him like a case file. His arguments meant nothing. His reputation meant nothing. The world spun on, indifferent. Chloe had vanished from his orbit entirely. Her posts grew sharper, cutting him down with every update. Imagine leaving your wife for a man who can't even keep his job. Some masks don't just slip, they shatter. She wasn't just abandoning him. She was rewriting their story, painting herself as the victim who had been deceived. And people believed her. Of course they did. She was polished, strategic, and Marcus was silent. His phone gone, his access severed, he had no way to defend himself. He wasn't just losing control, he was erased. Sophie called that evening, her voice trembling with the weight of everything she'd watched unfold. "Bella, you've destroyed him. He's finished." "Good," I said, though my tone was softer than I expected. "That's what he wanted for me. To discard me, to leave me with nothing. I just returned the favor." She hesitated. "Will you tell him? Will you let him know it was you?" The question hung heavy. I had imagined it, of course, the moment I'd stand in front of him, the truth laid bare, watching realization shatter across his face. But another part of me knew silence was crueler. Silence left him guessing. Silence let him spiral, alone in the thought that maybe the world itself had turned against him. "I don't need to," I said finally. "He already knows." Somewhere in that room, when they took his phone and he saw Chloe disappear and his career collapse, he realized. He knows who did this. And that's enough. Back in the retreat, I imagined the moment they broke him. Perhaps it was during another group session, when he tried to protest again, only for the facilitator to look at him with pity. "Marcus, every time you resist, you prove why you're here." Or maybe it was later, alone in his room, when he finally shouted into the silence, only to hear his voice echo back without answer. The realization that no one was listening, that was the death of his mask. I sat by the window of my Chicago hotel, the city lights reflecting in the glass, and thought about the woman I had been. The woman who forgave, who bent herself into softness, who excused every absence and every late-night phone call. That woman had boarded a dream once, hoping Marcus would meet her there. But Marcus had boarded another flight, leaving her behind. And in that moment, she had died. What rose from her ashes was me, colder, sharper, but freer. I whispered into the glass, words meant only for myself. You tried to erase me, Marcus. But now, you're the one who doesn't exist. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything I had taken back, everything I had built from the wreckage. And as I poured myself another glass of wine, I realized I didn't need his acknowledgement. His ruin was enough. His silence was enough. Marcus had wanted paradise. Instead, he found a prison. And I had found peace. If Marcus had believed there was a lower point to fall to, he was wrong. The retreat had stripped him of freedom, Chloe had stripped him of loyalty, and the company had stripped him of reputation. Now, the retreat itself was stripping him of identity. Reports came in through Sophie, who had a contact working in Santorini. He's deteriorating, she told me over the phone. They say he's angry one moment, silent the next. He refuses to participate in group sessions, so they mark him down as non-compliant. He's basically digging himself a deeper hole. I almost pitied him, almost. But pity was a luxury Marcus had never given me. I imagined the scene vividly, Marcus sitting in a circle of linen-clad strangers, his arms folded tight, jaw locked, eyes glaring at the floor. When asked to share, he would sneer and mutter, "This is all a mistake. I don't belong here." The facilitator, ever calm, would smile faintly. That's denial, Marcus. Many guests struggle with acceptance. The others would nod, and Marcus would feel the walls closing in tighter. Every refusal only confirmed their narrative. His voice had no weight here. His anger was reduced to ink on a clipboard. Meanwhile, Chloe had become the chorus of his downfall. She wasn't just distancing herself, she was capitalizing on the scandal. Sophie sent me screenshots of Chloe's newest posts. When people show you who they are, believe them. Never invest in a man who lies to everyone, including himself. She had reinvented herself as the victim, the woman deceived by Marcus's duplicity. Her network sympathized, her reputation remained intact, and Marcus's image rotted further with every like and share. He had left me for her, and now she was feeding on his collapse. At his company, the fallout spread wider than I'd imagined. Clients withdrew accounts, citing concerns over stability. Everett, his former supervisor, released a statement internally, "We value integrity above all. Recent violations by Marcus Hayes do not reflect our standards." The firm was scrubbing his name from everything, presentations, proposals, even archived projects. It was as though Marcus had never existed. Erasure. Clean, efficient, final. I sat on the balcony of my modest hotel, the Chicago wind biting at my skin, and realized how quiet my life had become. No constant buzzing of Marcus's phone at dinner. No half-hearted excuses for late nights at the office. No weight pressing on my chest as I tried to convince myself I was enough. The silence was unfamiliar, but it wasn't empty. It was mine. Inside the retreat, Marcus must have felt the opposite. Isolation. Claustrophobia. A gnawing realization that the outside world was moving on without him. I pictured him at night, lying in a narrow bed beneath fluorescent lights, staring at the ceiling, every breath filled with dread. For the first time in his life, he couldn't manipulate, couldn't negotiate, couldn't escape. He had nothing but his thoughts, and I wondered if those thoughts replayed the moment he kissed my cheek at the airport and walked away. Did he realize that was the moment he signed his own sentence? The final blow, however, was still mine to deliver. The company had fired him, but I held something sharper, a set of carefully crafted documents that linked his misuse of funds to possible fraud. It wasn't fabricated, it was magnified truth. Enough to ensure he wouldn't just lose his job. He would lose his future. No firm would touch him. No investor would trust him. He wouldn't just be unemployed. He'd be untouchable. Sophie asked me the question again, hesitant. Bella, do you want him to know it was you? Do you want to step out from the shadows and take credit? I thought about it, long and hard. The image of Marcus's face, realization dawning as he connected the dots, was tempting. But then I remembered the silence of the airport gate, the emptiness of standing alone while he boarded another plane. That silence had cut deeper than words ever could. Perhaps silence would be my sharpest blade now too. He knows, I said finally. Even if he can't prove it, he knows. And the not knowing for sure, that uncertainty, is worse than any confession. That night, I drafted the final package. A neat file, compiled and ready, sent to a contact in financial oversight. Anonymous, untraceable. It would trigger an investigation, the kind that dragged on for months, staining his name long after the world had already moved on. Marcus would leave the retreat someday, but he would walk into a world where every door had already closed. He would be free, but he would be nothing. For years, Marcus made me feel invisible. A shadow at his side, a name on his arm but never in his heart. Now, he was the one erased, silenced, unseen. I had become everything he never believed I could be, strong, precise, untouchable. And he had become everything he feared, weak, forgotten, irrelevant. I whispered into the dark as I sealed the final envelope of my revenge. You reached paradise, Marcus. But paradise didn't want you. And when you walk out of that retreat, the world won't either. There's a strange calm that comes after destruction. I didn't expect it. I thought the moment I sent the final documents I would feel triumphant, my veins buzzing with victory. Instead, I felt quiet. As if my body had been holding its breath for years, and now, finally, I had exhaled. The file had been delivered to financial oversight, a neat package of receipts, bookings, and connections Marcus thought no one would ever scrutinize. Fraud wasn't just an office scandal, it was a stain that never washed out. With one anonymous email, I ensured his name would be tied to investigations and whispers for the rest of his life. He wasn't just fired. He was finished. Sophie called later that evening, her voice carrying both awe and caution. Bella, they've launched a full review. He's blacklisted. No firm will touch him. Not now, not ever. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Good. That's exactly where he belongs. And Marcus, she asked softly. Do you think he knows? Oh, he knows, I said, my voice steady. He may not have proof, but he knows. And that's enough. Inside the Ionian retreat, Marcus must have sensed the last of his world slipping away. I pictured him in one of their reflection sessions, a sterile room with pale walls and a therapist leaning forward with practiced empathy. Marcus, tell us about your relationship with control, they'd ask. He'd glare, clench his fists, maybe even laugh bitterly. You think I had control? Look where I am. And the therapist would only nod, jotting down a note, breakthrough. But this wasn't a breakthrough. This was collapse. The man who once ruled rooms with arrogance and charm was now just another patient, his protests reduced to symptoms, his anger reframed as illness. And beyond those locked doors, the world had already moved on, scrubbing his name from memory. Chloe had disappeared from his orbit completely. Her social media was full of curated smiles again, as though Marcus had never existed. She wasn't carrying his ruin, she was stepping over it, rebuilding her image on his ashes. He had chosen her over me, and now she had chosen herself over him. Betrayers always end up betrayed. It was almost poetic. But the real poetry wasn't Chloe. It was me. I wasn't just surviving Marcus's betrayal, I had transformed it. I had taken the pain of being left at an airport gate, the humiliation of being discarded, and turned it into a weapon so sharp it cut through every corner of his life. And when I looked at the wreckage, I didn't see him anymore. I saw myself, standing, unbroken, stronger than I'd ever been. A week later, another update arrived from the retreat. Mr. Hayes has been transitioned into extended observation. Resistance continues. Prognosis, indefinite stay recommended. Indefinite. I let the word linger on my tongue like honey. He wasn't just trapped temporarily. He was trapped indefinitely, in a system that saw his denial as proof and his protests as reason to keep him longer. Every word he spoke sealed the door tighter. Every attempt to escape chained him further. He had wanted paradise, but he had created his own prison. I closed the message and sat by the window, watching the city below. For years, I had been afraid of endings. Afraid that leaving Marcus meant losing myself, afraid that betrayal meant I was unworthy, afraid that silence meant I didn't matter. But this wasn't fear. This was freedom. The ending wasn't mine, it was his. My story was only beginning. Sophie visited me a few days later. We sat together in a cafe, the clatter of cups and low hum of conversation wrapping around us. She studied me carefully, as if searching for cracks. "You look different," she said at last. "I am different," I replied simply. "I'm not waiting anymore. Not for him, not for anyone." "Do you feel guilty?" she asked gently. I thought about it. The nights Marcus had left me waiting for him at dinner. The mornings he dismissed my plans with a distracted kiss. The moment he boarded another plane with another woman and left me standing alone. Did I feel guilty for taking back the power he stole from me? No. I felt whole. "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "I feel free." And I meant it. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by Marcus's choices, his lies, his betrayals. I was defined by my own. And I had chosen to rise. As we left the cafe, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street. People hurried past, caught up in their own stories, their own betrayals and victories. I walked among them, no longer carrying Marcus's weight on my shoulders. He was gone from my world, erased by his own arrogance and my quiet precision. Back at the hotel, I poured myself a final glass of wine and raised it to the silence. To endings, I whispered. To freedom. To never being invisible again. Miles away, Marcus sat in a sterile room, his voice dismissed, his past erased, his future gone. And I didn't need to see him to know the truth. His story was over. Mine was just beginning.